Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back once again to Samuel Adams Returns Those Anti-Federalists from a interesting perspective as we're continuing with the discussion that G.R. Mobley and I have had. The Anti-Federalists did get it right, but we are going to be hammering on those states' constitutional conventions to get the whole effect on how our federal constitution should function. And with that, today we're going to be on the topic of education. With me in studio is Tom Hack. You've seen him before on the programs. And on the phone with me is Kirsten Hill. Are you there, Kirsten?
I am. Glad to be on, Tom. Thank you.
No, thank you. Kirsten is currently an elected, get this, and we're going to distinguish this as we talk about Ohio. She is a current elected member of the Ohio Board of Education. That is the state board. And what counties do you represent, Kirsten?
I represent 7 counties right up along Lake Erie, from east to west, Lorain, Erie, Huron, Ottawa, Lucas, Wood, and Fulton, which borders Michigan. So about 7 counties.
Wow, that's a large area, and that's pretty representative of all of the elected board members, is it not?
Yes, there's 11 elected board members, and an easy way to figure it out, which I just learned when I got on the board, is that each of the state school board districts encompasses 3 state senate districts and 9 state house districts. Thus, you've got 99 in the House, 33 in the state senate, and 11 on the state board that are elected.
Wow,
So that's how that works.
Yeah. So, and folks, you need to look at your own state and the makeup of your state's Board of Education, because the similarities may be there, but, this is how Ohio is set up, and that's what we're going to deal with. And we're also going to look at how is the Ohio State Board split up, Kirsten, between elected members and then, critical to understand, folks, governor appointed members.
There are 8 appointed members in addition to the 11 elected. So it makes 19 voting members altogether.
Okay.
And everyone is either elected or appointed to a 4-year term, and they alternate. So one election, you'll have 5 members up for election, and the next you'll have 6. That makes the 11. And then for the governor appointees, the governor will appoint 4 every other year, and then the other 4 in the other years. So that's those appointees are a large block of the board.
They are. And that's pretty true in a number of the different boards, although the elected members, or for instance, in a lot of the other county entities throughout the state, where county commissioners can appoint members and then the state can appoint members. Usually the people representatives, the elected or so, have the larger number in comparison to those that are, I always call government appointed or state appointed. So we pretty much have similar in case of our state school board. Now, when you and I were talking, and what's really a big hubbub across the whole nation is the common term of CRT, or critical race theory. But one of the things that you've really brought to bear is the actions that happened in the middle of the night, if you will, at the Ohio Board of Education to put in a resolution. I think you call it the Kohler Resolution. And this came much sooner than what we're experiencing at the national level, did it not?
Right. Things were, boiling last summer with the, riots in Portland and Minneapolis and so on. And the board president's last name is Kohler, so thus the Kohler Resolution. It was at our June board meeting of June of 2020. We always meet the second Monday and Tuesday. The board president let the board know that in the following month, at our July 2020 meeting, she would be bringing forth a resolution in response to the political situation happening in the country at the time. And her first draft of the resolution was just a sort of a recognition of what was going on. The board, you understand, is highly political. It should be less politicized, in fact. So why we were responding to something happening in the news, is kind of, I think it was the board was being used to push this. So anyway, the resolution that we got in July was not the same as the first one that we got in June. It was 2+ pages and had a lot of language. It was obvious that there were many other players that were involved. And it includes many of the terminology that we know under the umbrella of critical race theory. And there's a whole vocabulary. You won't necessarily see critical race theory per se in education, in curriculums, and in schools, but you will see this other terminology. And some of the key terminology is like equity and culturally responsive, anti-racist, and these are all terms that the woke crowd use. So, but if you want me to talk a little bit about that,
we'll
deliberation of that resolution, I can do that, Tom.
Yeah, no, yes and no. We're going to get to that, but I wanted to ask Tom, because Tom is also not only involved in Lake County Liberty Coalition, you're involved in Free Ohio Now, and so is Kirsten. And what's the other group?
So the Liberty Action Network.
Okay, good. But you're also a local school board member.
I am.
So when this happened last July, how did that bubble down to a local school board, or did it not in any respect?
So in Ohio, we have this gray area called local control. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's pretty clear where you have local control, and then sometimes the state tries to influence what goes on at the local school district level. And for those who may not know, there are over 600 school districts in all of Ohio. So we really have just a very large number of school districts. So when this came down, there was not an immediate effect, and I worked with the administrators in my district to make sure that was just not incorporated into our curriculum. We certainly, I want to be clear, we there are a lot of really great things that happen in America, and there are a lot of really bad things that have happened. Clearly, in my opinion, in the opinion of I think most of your listeners, America is a shining beacon. But we are a shining beacon with flaws, and we need to teach those flaws so that future generations understand where their ancestors went wrong, and to make sure we don't go wrong into the future. But you don't invent things with 1619, and you don't drive to the point where people are divided through CRT and whatever nomenclature they're using today to describe it. So to answer your question in short, there was no pressure on us to use it, but it is a curriculum that other districts can use because it's on the state school board website. So it's an approved curriculum.
Okay, so that's a critical point that we want to bring out, as Kirsten also did a fantastic, she's been attending a number of different meetings and presenting a slide presentation. So we're going to kind of refer back and forth to that. But again, it's going to go to what Tom just said, depending on the school board, what the adoption of a curriculum is. So it's and that this has to be made very clear, and you need to check this in your state and in your school district, is what are the curriculums that are being promoted or available for adoption. Some states, they're forcing curriculums. Other states allow it, as Tom was indicating, in Ohio, to have a loosey-goosey type of adoption based on, I guess, the philosophy of the local school board. Kirsten, when we're looking at your presentation, I'm kind of looking at I think it's slide number 4, where it talks about important to learn more about. What is Action Civics? Is that the curriculum that's being promoted in this relationship, or what does that mean, Action Civics?
Yes. Okay. So actually, action civics would refer more to the, let's say, college level. And
Okay.
I wanted to, this was sort of an extra that came to my attention. The National Association of Scholars, a gentleman by the name of David Randall, wrote a report, and it was actually published in January of 2017. And what he did was he did case studies of particular colleges across the country. And this report is like a 500-page report, a result of that work that he did. The National Association of Scholars is in Washington, D.C. And what the conclusions were was it's what we've been experiencing, but we didn't really have a term for it. And that is when, let's say, our college students come home and they don't agree with the parents. What's happening is the college campuses have been turned into recruitment and training centers for the woke side of things. And this is where teachers are trained, let's say, and they're then, once they've graduated from college and they're going to become teachers in the K through 12 schools, they're bringing that into the classroom. And so that's what's happening. To show, I'm just demonstrating, the seeping down from the colleges, which we've known for a couple decades,
Sure.
is coming into the local classroom. So that's what Action Civics. I want to point out one thing when you talk about critical race theory as a curriculum. In fact, it's something that the woke side wants to have embedded. It's a practice. It's the way something's taught. So it won't necessarily be a particular subject matter by itself, but it will be included in all the various subjects.
Okay, so that's what we're looking.
Studies, math and reading and all that.
Yeah. So at this point, I'll put up like slide 7, where you're talking about CRT in practice. And that's what you're really describing to us right now. And I think it's critical, from what you're pointing out, is that language matters. And these are a lot of the catchphrases then that would be woven into all of the other curriculum that's out there to try and tickle the minds of the students to into this awareness of these types of woke attitudes and ideas and everything. Is that what you're saying?
Right. I think if you're looking at the one where I have the list of words, I guess, equity, culturally responsive, anti-racist, each of those words, and actually I have that I have a full vocabulary list with definitions of what these mean at my website, kirstenhill.com. And there's a full list there, everything from describing the 1619 Project, critical race theory, including links to more information. So if people really want to dig into it, because language does matter. And
Excellent.
Equity does not mean the same as equality.
Exactly. And again, your website, would you just give that to us again?
Sure. kirstenhill.com. That's KIRSTENHILL.com.
Perfect. And we'll have that, for everybody that's watching the video on YouTube, and now we're on Rumble as well. We'll be able to see all of that and see the slides, as well as get that of your website. So, I mean, we're down to our last minute here. So when we're looking at not just critical race theory as a theoretical thing that's being pushed and all of the loudness that's out there, it really comes down to two things as we finish up this segment, is that in Washington State, we had a slippery slope that occurred when the superintendent of public education promoted an idea, and everybody kind of went, oh, so this was like in your June meeting, and then in your July meeting, he comes back with this whole thing that was developed by many persons that then slides through on an interesting election cycle, and then boom, when you start looking and digging in, we're seeing that it is being interwoven into curriculum that, boy, that makes it really difficult for local school districts, makes it extremely difficult then at the state level. And you know what? Education was a key element of something that Sam Adams was very interested in, and we'll come back in the next segment, folks. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to this second segment of Samuel Adams Returns Those Anti-Federalists. Yes, they did. They were perceptive in what the future could look like if we did not have a moral and virtuous people to develop moral and virtuous leaders. And, you know, as always, that's why it's important to join us at Liberty Works Radio Network, who host this program. Get in there, look at all the other hosts and hostesses, and most important, find that donate button. This is a listener-funded network, and so we appreciate you doing that. In studio, I have with me our friend and patriot compadre, no other than we can sit here and hit it Tom, you know, with Tom Hack. And then on the phone with us today is Kirsten Hill, who is an elected member of the Ohio State Board of Education. Kirsten, you still there?
I am.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, we're going to kind of jump back now. Now, Tom, when you're looking at just the implementation, you said that it's not really being pushed in your school district. But what about what Kirsten was saying in the last one? You have all these young teachers that are being hired. What observations can you, as a school board, have in relationship to the teachers now coming in with this type of ideology that are going, wait a minute, that's a curriculum that we want, or they're going, oh yeah, we'll definitely weave that into an existing curriculum. What have you guys been observing of that and confronted with that?
So not so much in my district, but I have heard rumor that there are some teachers that are more woke than others. And here's the situation. Here's the truth is that the teachers have some autonomy in their classroom. Mm-hmm. So they are able to add their own personal perspective into what they teach. And that is not something that's going to, I'm not sure how you deal with that and not destroy education. So let's set that aside and go to the earlier point you made. Mm-hmm. And I am involved with trying to get as many people to run for school board as possible and to aid them in upping their game to increase their chances of winning, to get more people who think like us at the local level. That's a starting point. And everything that we're talking about, everything that you do, everything that Kirsten does, there is no end to this, right?
Correct.
It is a continuous process. Self-governance is a regular avocation that we need to all incorporate into our daily being.
Right.
So eventually we are going to have to not only have major influence at the local school board level, we're going to have to work our way up and take back the universities.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No, that's a key element. That's something that, I've talked about for years, is that how do we then restore, but that's a whole nother topic for another program and another day. I don't want to jump down that rabbit hole, because boy, we can snake all over the world with that one. But when it comes down to is that we have the autonomy of the teachers that can be, as we're looking at another slide here from Kirsten's presentation, slide number 9, that talks about change agents. So Kirsten, would you because this one's on the executive director of the Ohio Council of Teachers of Mathematics. So this kind of segues around what Tom was just talking about, the potential and individuality of the teachers, and this one happens to be in a particular subject matter. How are these change agent elements then looked at, from the state position, especially on a funding basis, or these what I call these third-party councils, like the teachers of mathematics?
Yeah, so the slide that you're referring to and that your viewers can see there, I was made aware of an article from April of this year, and this is profiling a woman who's the director of the Ohio Council of Teachers of Math. And she's quoted in the Akron Beacon Journal as saying there's an overrepresentation of white students and often Asian students in math, and in the lower tracks we have an overrepresentation of students of color. And so part of her goal, is to promote policies and practices that support, quote, I'm doing air quotes, equity and inclusiveness in math. So in fact, the proposal, it's written right in the article to eliminate tracking. So if you don't like the results, you get rid of the system, right? This is serious. So there are idealistic people in these kind of positions in an association where, let's say, there's a lot of math teachers that belong to the Math Teachers Association. Same thing with social studies. There's multiple social studies that belong to those associations. And so that's a way that the powers that be that want to push this kind of critical race theory into the schools, they would do it through those associations that the teachers have regular connection with, through their publications, through their professional development, through their conferences, that sort of thing.
So this is really, and I don't know that we're going to get to any solution on this, but I think, we're getting a good brain trust to move in, and maybe we do a follow-up on it posed on this question, is that we're seeing in the media, the generalized media, a lot of people standing up in front of school boards. We're seeing 600 parents down in Virginia showing up and basically, having the sheriff called in, and what is that, Loudoun?
It was Loudoun County.
Loudoun County School District, and all these different areas. But it's not just at the school board level. To Tom's point, that you only see so much, and I'm sure the other school boards are very familiar. But when you have the outside influences that are reaching into all of these other areas, I don't think parents are aware, except from your presentation, that it is such a broad attack, that it's not just a frontal attack that's coming from the state school board through some resolution and all of that.
Tom, I want to jump in, and there is a group right here in Northeast Ohio that is called, I think it's something along the lines of the Northeast Ohio Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Center, something like that. And they are outside contractors for schools. So school districts will hire them to come in and say, do an audit of the school to see if the school is properly diversified in their curriculum or in their hiring practice or in their staffing. So it's a whole industry, and those kinds of organizations and individuals who've set up businesses to be the experts in this area, hire out for tens of thousands of dollars. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry now.
So let me ask you this. So yeah, I get that now, but how is it that do the school boards have any determination on the schools contracting out for that, or is it just an independent thing?
Tom could probably speak to it more closely in terms of decisions made by the board about purchasing or engaging in hiring. I do know in Rocky River, the superintendent of the district just happens to be a board member for the Northeast Ohio Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Center.
Wait a minute.
May not have it right.
Isn't it? What's that called? I mean, that's nepotism at the best, let alone collusion at the worst.
Yeah, local citizens were calling for his resignation based on a conflict of interest in that case. But I believe, I would imagine that this sort of, if the local school board member is engaged and aware of purchases and contracts, this would be something that would come across their desk.
All right, let's ask Tom about that. Go ahead, Tom.
Sure. Absolutely, the local school board would have to approve all the contracts. It would be on the agenda, and they would have to be done in a public forum, right? At the regular school board meetings or whatever.
That's what I think.
Yeah, but clearly every school board member would have to be aware of what they're voting for.
Right. And so that becomes then that broader educational function, which, some of what we're trying to do now is that, hopefully this will get out to school boards everywhere so that, number one, parents don't just show up to a meeting and start, screaming about CRT, although there's been some good, especially young students or even black members of the community that have been able to get up there and articulate the downfalls of it. But greater is to confront the business element that is actually going in and trying to make those other changes. In the last couple of minutes here, Kirsten, if you would take and kind of speak to a little bit on, you're talking about the community conference component there on slide number 10. Could you kind of highlight that for us and what that is? Is there some kind of a session agenda? And within
Oh, okay,
2 minutes,
yes.
please.
You're really, yeah. So the slide that you're looking at, it's titled CRT in Practice, Educational Community Conference, my question mark there. This is a screenshot of an invitation that I received at my Ohio Board of Education email, that it was an invitation to join in to a conference happening in May of this year. And it was open to students, teachers, staff, school leaders, workers, guidance counselors, psychologists, families. And all the yellow highlights on the page, it's hard to read the words, but those are, I wanted to make people aware how they can see these key words, this terminology, and how it seeps in. So this is in fact, that word change agent, and that means, basically moving people towards being, let's say, activists in education. And some of the other terminology in the sessions for that day were inclusive, promoting equity for Black and Brown students, equitable access to schools, culturally responsive, and so on. So that's what you're looking at. That was an actual invitation that I received, that's promoting and teaching people about how to do critical race stuff in their classroom or in their school district.
Yeah, thank you. And, one of the things that I always look at and talk about from the historical perspective on education, which we are so far away from it. Sam Adams was an educator after he retired from being governor of Massachusetts and left politics. He dedicated his life to instructing and working with kids in schools. And the little known fact about him is that he was one of the very first proponents that girls would be educated in the same manner as boys. So he looked at that, very, very importantly. And as well is that there were no racial barriers in his home, because at one point someone had given his wife, his second wife, because his first wife passed away, had given his second wife a black woman. And he goes, well, where'd she come from? What's this all about? He says, well, so and so, gave me. And he says, we're not going to have any of that. But he made asked that young lady, you can live in my home as one of my household, but if you want to do that, you're welcome to do that. But here's how we operate, and if that's acceptable to you, fine. And she did, and she helped very much in the household. She helped also as part of educating, and she got educated to the point that when after the American Revolution and they were giving people in the North papers for their freedom that happened to have been black, she goes, I've been free, for all the years that I'm here. I don't need any papers. So, again, it goes to the truth about a lot of our founding fathers, and a lot, they focus on the South. They don't look at a lot of what happened in the North with a lot of the different people that we have. And I'm going to consume the rest of this minute as we close out, because it becomes important to understand, and I want every listener to understand what Kirsten just said in that slides back up for you to see, is that there are these agendas and how to make activists. Now, one of the things that Tom and Kirsten do, and we'll talk about towards the end of the third segment again, is with Free Ohio Now, the Ohio Liberty Coalition, and there's so many other groups that need to come together, and we have to be those activists. We have to be the ones that are able to intellectually counter this with counter language and all, because Kirsten put up there, language matters, and it absolutely does, especially as folks learn constitutionally what is correct. We have to then be able to apply that in a manner that matters. But with that, as I always say, Sam Adams got it. I mean, he tried to bring everything to the truth, and those anti-federalists warned about it. And so come on back for the third segment. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to this third segment of Samuel Adams Returns Those Anti-Federalists Got It Right. This is Tom Navolis, your host. I never noticed if I introduced myself at all, but I did introduce Tom Hack and Kirsten Hill.
That's the important thing, isn't it?
Well, yeah, you and Kirsten. I mean, that's what the
We're
show.
back.
The show's all about you guys. I mean, I'm just kind of here. But welcome back as well as to all of those folks down there in Lima, Ohio with Soaring Eagle Radio, my Screaming Eagles. You know what? You guys are going to get a little bit shortchanged because I'm not taking any breaths in here where I usually am able to cut out a whole bunch of time to get it down into that 28 minutes for you. So we're just going to hammer away, and whatever happens, happens at the end of this, that you get it. But then you get to go back and listen to the full program at the podcast, or go to Samuel Adams Returns at YouTube. And we have now Samuel Adams Returns channel up on Rumble. So you'll get your choices there. But as we left and during the break, Kirsten brought out something about the organization that we were talking about in the second segment, who in many ways, I know that they're not trying to be, but I will use it, my term, this is my opinion, which I have no opinions, right, Tom? Yeah, is that this nefarious organization, sorry, Kirsten, but Kirsten will, who was it that you wanted to reintroduce that we talked about in the last segment?
Yes, I was tentative because I wasn't sure of their name, but the organization is called the Diversity Center of Northeast Ohio, and they have a website that I would encourage everybody to go take a look at, diversitycenterneo.org. And they have a couple of videos, and they have information about who they are and what they do. And you can see that's the kind of organization that could be approaching your school board members in your local districts that you want to be cautious about engaging with. So
Good.
that's who I was thinking of.
Great, thank you. And for this folks that didn't catch it before, what we found out and who's responsible for these organizations coming in doing assessments, and that are the local school boards. And Tom, you're doing a presentation at what, Empower You, and they're out of Cincinnati primarily, but I mean, they get their stuff out all over the country.
Yeah. So I was very fortunate. I came across the gentleman who runs Empower You. His name is Dan Reginald, and he's clearly involved, as Kirsten mentioned earlier, is Stop CRT, and so he's behind that as well. And he has done just a number of incredible things with Empower You. We had a conversation about the possibility of me doing a class on how to run for school board. So I'm going to cover the basics, and if people want to, by the time this airs, my class will already be over, but I will give you the website so people can go view it if they so choose. But it's really the basics. You know, how do you file? What do you need to put down from your bio perspective so that you can put it into your literature? What's your strategy on communicating with voters? How do you get out the vote? How do you do the absentee chase? Really fundamental things that if you're not involved with politics, you may not know that much about. It's not rocket science, but by the same token, it is a particular area of knowledge that people need to be acquainted with, and I hope to shed some light on that.
Yeah, no, I mean it's absolutely critical, because we talk about how's the first way that we can really start working at taking our country back, and it's always gone to and through education, as I mentioned earlier, is that, and it's two places, the churches, and then secondly is in education. If we don't have a moral and virtuous people, you're not going to get moral and virtuous people to be in office. So because that's what comes out of our society, our ability to vote, and at the same time, how to get the proper people on the school board. Which kind of gets to Kirsten's slide here. Let's see, what did I say that slide number was? Number 12, Kirsten. And for those on the radio and podcast, please, I beg you to go look at the video, because we have a lot of different slides up from Kirsten's presentation embedded in here. And with her permission, which I'm asking now, we will put the PDF as a resource as well to get the things that we're missing. But when we look at what Tom's saying, getting elected to not just a local school board, I mean, Kirsten, first off, you getting elected to the state school board was a fluke, wasn't it?
Yes, I could write a small booklet what happened with that race. That's for sure.
Well,
But,
let's just put a pause and just that
yes,
it was a miracle. Let me put it that way.
it was divine intervention that I got elected to the board, and I haven't missed a meeting yet. So
Yeah.
but the chart that you're looking at was I put together. This was looking back again at that resolution, the fateful evening at 11 p.m. that the board voted on Kohler's what I call the racist equity resolution, and this gives you insight into those appointed members and how they influence this resolution. And just so everybody's clear, the resolution itself is basically promoting and sort of codifying and encouraging, strongly recommending local school districts take a look at their hiring, their curriculum, their staffing for any internal or implicit bias, and so it's pretty egregious. The vote came out 12 approving, 5 against, and 1 abstention. And the chart shows that of the 12, 7 were appointees. No appointees voted against this resolution. So if the board were completely elected members only, this resolution, in fact, would not have passed. It would have been 5-5 with 1 abstention, or even 5-6, because the abstention, the person probably would have voted with the no side. So that shows you how influential the governor can be with his appointments on the Ohio Board of Education.
Yeah, it's true. And I think that becomes where I mentioned to both Kirsten and Tom before the program or during one of the breaks, is that this is critical, folks, from my perspective. When we're looking at Ohio, as you well may be in your state, considering who to elect as governor. And when you look at not just the governor out there song and dancing about all these different things he's going to do, you take and you have to go and ask the hard question. Number one, who is on your campaign staff and what are you going to owe them later? And where are you going to place them if, in fact, you're going to be elected? So that's a 2-part, 1 question. Then the second question is, who is going to vet all of the appointments that you're going to make inside the bureaucracies that you have the ability to appoint into? This being one, education in the state of Ohio is absolutely critical. You have to understand that the COVID, the Chinese, the Chi-Com flu, as I always call it, response here in Ohio, the Governor DeWine's appointed medical director in the first iteration was a lady that happened to be a Democrat. Well, how in the world is that person going to go with your ideology when they have a contrary ideology right from the get-go? So it comes down to how is the state going to be governed within the context of that administration. Here we see very clearly on this chart, we're not going to necessarily get into the nuts and bolts of each one of these appointed persons, but Kirsten, I would gather, I would presume, and I don't want to put egg on my face by using the assume, so I'm going to presume that a lot of these folks are at minimum left-leaning, if not all the way to the opposite side of our sense of constitutionalism. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I wouldn't necessarily go so far to say that these people are necessarily leftists. In fact, I've used the term useful idiots. because that's for real. They may be altruistic in thinking that they're doing something good, but they don't understand the woven in agendas, because this critical race theory stems from critical theory, and which is connected back to the Frankfurt School, and it's you know it the promoting Marxism. So
Right.
they don't necessarily know all those connections, and that this has connections back to that. So I would be a little more cautious in saying they may not be all the way leftist, but hopefully today they might vote differently than they did a year ago.
Mhm.
I know so much more than I did. I didn't even know half of the terminology. I
Sure.
just knew something wasn't right, but I didn't have a deep understanding like more so that I do today.
So I really appreciate that. And so that is also very important then as to who's vetting the people, what do they know, and why should they be appointed to something such as a board when it is so important that underlying currents have an influence to, at some point in time, become what is that sucks people out into the ocean? Or even
The riptide.
they become a riptide. So these underlying currents of all these other entities and these pressure points and all of that, or the invited agendas that people come to, things sound good, but as we've been learning in one of the constitutional classes, is just because an amendment to the Constitution sounds good does not mean that it is the best thing or the right thing for good governance, and that means same for good education. What are we down to? Last couple of minutes? We're down to about 3 minutes. Uh, here, a 2-minute free for all between Tom and Kirsten. Let's talk about a little bit, because I think the impact points will be not just what happens on the school boards, but Free Ohio Now, the Ohio Liberty Coalition. What are they doing in relationship to getting the word out? What are they doing to help promote liberty so people aren't useful idiots?
Yeah, let me jump in first, and I'll talk about the Ohio Liberty Coalition. Is another group. What we have been working on, Kirsten and I, and several other of us, is the Liberty Action Network. And the Liberty Action Network is designed. Think of an inverted triangle, and so the leaders of the various groups, that the Liberty focus groups, are at the top. We have regional captains in the middle, and then we have administrative group at the bottom. Kirsten and I, as well as 2 other people, are part of that administrative group. But the goal of the Liberty Action Network, at a minimum, is to help share ideas across the Liberty groups to ensure that we are getting the best ideas, rubber on the road, to push back against the tyranny that's coming our way, and to also share calls to action, so that we get more people involved in pushing back and helping any individual call to action be more effective. And then thirdly, on our website, which has not been developed yet, but when we do get a website up, is to get all of the events that are, as many as possible, we're not going to get them all, but as many events as possible that the Liberty groups around the state are having, so that people are aware of what's going on, so that we can truly be a force to reckon with.
Okay, good. Kirsten, your thoughts?
Yes, I know often it's nice for people who are interested in the topic to know what they can do next or where they can go. And I would recommend 2 websites that people might want to look at. And one is stopcriticalracetheory.com. And there's many articles on there. You can sign the petition on there to get more feedback from people who are out there fighting the fight at the school districts. And then the other website, that's stopcriticalracetheory.com, is the first website. And the second one is protectohiochildren.net. And what they have that's really cool is they have a map of the state of Ohio showing outlining all the 600 plus school districts, and then evidence that anonymous tips have been coming in from citizens around the state showing the critical race theory in their district.
Okay, great. Thank you, Kirsten. Thanks for all the information and websites, and please send those to me. Folks, in these last few seconds here, get your feet on the streets, your butts out of the seats, and do something in your own state. Good information. Sam Adams always promoted truth. This is truth. This is great stuff. Come on back next week for Sam Adams Returns, because those anti-federalists did get it right.